You've joined yet another episode of the Frank Figliuzzi Show, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for our next guest, who you likely know from his contributions to MS Now, formerly known as MSNBC, the network formerly known as MSNBC. You've seen him there for years. I think we've actually been on the air together. I'm sure we have, maybe even in studio together at 30 Rock. Charlie Sykes started his career in journalism as an investigative journalist at the local level, covered state, county politics, national politics. He became the host of the Daily Standard, the revived podcast of the Weekly Standard magazine back in 2018. You may also know that, or you may not know that Charlie was the founder and editor-at-large of The Bulwark and host of the Bulwark podcast for 5 or 6 years. He's still on MS Now, and we're fortunate to have him on a host of issues today. Charlie Sykes, thanks for joining us.
It is good to be with you. It's good to have survived the weekend. So it's good to be anywhere.
We survived, and we were talking before the show here that you had a Trump-free week, or at least a holiday, and I applaud you for that.
You know, this was one of the things that I thought about is, people had mixed feelings about the Trumpified 4th of July, his attempt to hijack the holiday and make it all about him. And so, look, I think most Americans were nowhere near Washington, D.C. They were not around that absolute fiasco. And I was in Door County in Wisconsin, where, enjoyed the outdoor festivities and the fireworks. And there was just it was just MAGA free completely. And to spend 3 days without that guy being in my head, I have to say I highly recommend it. Very therapeutic.
It's important to remind ourselves that across America, particularly in Middle America, people are not fixated on for healthy reasons. They're not fixated on the lunacy that's going on and did go on in DC. One of the things that, not to exaggerate, but I often find myself going back to my days working counterterrorism, counterintelligence. And one of the things I noted, because I did catch some sporadic coverage of what was going on the Mall in Washington with the severe weather, the evacuation, lightning, really life-threatening conditions, stories that now I think are up to 50 or more EMS contacts with patients going down on the Mall, at least seven of which required advanced life support, Charlie. And why am I bringing up my counterterrorism experience? One of the marks of a cult-like devotion and following is the degree to which people are willing to place themselves in harm's way. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand out in a field while lightning is flashing and the Secret Service and the police are telling me to get out for my own safety. And they fought, Charlie, I don't know if you saw the coverage, they fought the law enforcement. They fought. And, no, I want to expose myself to death.
So I will confess that I did every once in a while look at all that, the National Guard troops, tossing over the picnic tables. And, look, as Rick Wilson said, everything Trump touches dies. And just, watching what he did to what should have been this great moment of, national unity, and just about everything about it was just tacky and crude and shitified. I'm sorry. I mean, look, they had the world's greatest fireworks show. What time did it begin? I mean, Trump actually began speaking at 11 o'clock at night, under these terrible conditions. Who's going to bring their kids to this event and right. To enjoy this? And also just his view of America was on display. And I think that we saw that. So I think that the healthiest thing was to separate from it as much as possible. Because I have to say, for the average American, July 4th had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was not defined by him. He didn't hijack it. I didn't see anything about him. I was in Egg Harbor, Wisconsin, and somebody, and I don't know whether he was MAGA or not, tried to start a USA chant. Nothing. Nobody picked up on it. Nobody wanted anything to do with any politics or even politics adjacent.
Yeah, indeed. And a sad state of affairs that just the three letters USA has become politicized as well. But that we may get there. I also noted that number one, his speech was absolutely a yawner. It was,
Yeah,
say
boring.
what you want about him, but many of his speeches are extremely entertaining, if not aggravating. But this was neither. It was a yawner, boring, and maybe it was the time of day. Maybe someone told him you better stick to your script. But he did screw up, and I know that that's normal. But let's see. He quoted when he said he was quoting the Declaration of Independence, he was actually quoting the Bible, which I can understand because in the Trump Bible, both those documents are in there. So,
So is that in the teleprompter? Because I was wondering about that. Like, who writes this stuff? This is not that actually that hard,
yeah,
know what's in the well, you'd hope that the president would know what's in the Constitution. I'm obviously
yeah, yeah.
smiling when I say this. Obviously, like he actually cared, or the Declaration of Independence. But you do wonder, other than Stephen Miller, who writes this stuff for him. But it was a very low energy speech, and you kind of felt the guy was sundowning a little bit.
Yeah.
But it felt like the anticlimax to a week of everything. I mean,
Mhm.
one thing
Yeah.
out, yeah, that's a great, wow, is that a
Speaking,
great
yeah,
way to
speaking of sundowning, Charlie, there he is asleep, and I say asleep with some great confidence because I've seen extended video and photos of that, and he eventually just slumps over even more, and he's out.
Yes, and he of course, took that stage thinking he was master of the universe. But I mean, when you think about the reflecting pool, the fiasco of all of that, everything that's been going on,
No.
it does seem that the president has not only become increasingly tone deaf, but he's kind of lost his touch. Isn't this the kind of thing that he's supposed to really be good at? Like,
Yeah.
building swimming pools and putting on great extravaganzas and everything like that. And yet, at every single stage, it was a bollock's job, and now he's bragging that everybody told him that because of the severe weather that they should cancel the event, that all of the responsible agencies told him, and he overruled them all. So going back to your cult thing, it's like I'm not going to listen to anybody, or put the safety of my supporters and their families,
Yeah.
at risk. I'm willing to do any of that because this was his party, and he's going to do whatever he wants amid the lightning and the thunder and the whatever.
Oh my
This
God.
was so
Yeah.
on brand for
I
Donald
mean,
Trump.
to top it all off, we've got the environmental authorities in DC have apparently issued an air quality alert because of the pollution of the record-setting fireworks. So, there we are again.
Well, 800,000 bombs, that'll
Oh
do it.
my Lord, the money that was spent on that, and now again, as you mentioned, the reflecting pool, which I'm still waiting for the names of the people who cut a 350-foot slash in the bottom of the pool. Now they've changed their story. I saw Secretary Burgum, Secretary of Interior, on the Sunday shows, and he said, "Well, it's actually a bunch of people." And it's like, well, did they each take a foot? Is it 350 of them, or what? But it's reflecting pool is metaphor for everything that Trump does. Yeah.
And of course, just keep in mind that Trump can never get anything wrong. He can never fail. He can never lose. There's always somebody to blame. There's always some shadowy saboteur, somebody who is conspiring against him. And this is not a glitch. This is very much his mentality right now. And it's been part of the authoritarian playbook for a very long time. When things don't work, you blame the saboteurs. You blame the fifth columnist there. You search out the traitors in our midst, and so part of it is humorous, and part of it is potentially quite dangerous, as you know.
For sure. So this morning, to get very topical, we've got Trump headed on a plane to Turkey to attend a NATO summit, and he announces beforehand that he's had calls with Putin and Zelensky over the weekend, and of course, they went very well, Charlie. And I have solved 8 wars, and I think I'm going to solve this one. We're very close. You, you have any thoughts on being yet again very close to solving Ukraine Russia?
Yeah, well, where are we at on the Iran war that was solved a couple of weeks ago? The Iranians over the weekend did not seem like they were a defeated nation when they were having that mass funeral. I mean, that was a show of something or other. Look, last night there was a missile attack on Ukraine, and Ukraine tragically was not able to intercept any of the missiles, the ballistic missiles, because we have been starving them of the Patriot missiles that they need. And this is part of Donald Trump's ongoing betrayal of Ukraine, ongoing appeasement of Vladimir Putin. And the problem is that Donald Trump still thinks that that he can deal with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has been playing him like a violin, has been humiliating him over and over again, and yet Trump never learns that lesson. The one thing we've seen is that I think that Ukraine really does have the momentum right now. It really, has been reaching deeper and deeper into Russia. Putin's hold on power seems increasingly shaky. So, if there is a resolution, it will have very little to do with Donald Trump,
Yeah,
except for
indeed.
the extent that he has cut Ukraine loose. But Ukraine is doing pretty well without Trump, aren't they?
Amazingly well, and really, our European friends need to also step up even further there, because clearly we're betraying a free people who want to remain free. And yes, Kyiv and Ukraine have been struck a couple nights in a row now, severely, and the loss of life is growing. But I'll point out, according to the most recent data, Russia's lost far more of its men than Ukraine. It's
Well, and the other thing is the Ukrainians are being strategic in their targeting. They're going after
Yes.
the energy infrastructure of Russia. Russia appears to just be throwing missiles at civilian targets. Now, civilian targets may spread terror, but they are not of the kind of military value of the Ukrainian targets, which I think is quite significant.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you pointed that out. Ukraine's getting their apartment buildings and shopping malls and churches and grocery stores hit, and Ukraine's trying to do the right thing and actually degrade Russia's military. And indeed, um, National Guard in Memphis, Tennessee, has shot and killed, I believe, a 20-year-old young man this weekend. And I want to, before we chat about that, I do want to kind of set the playing field, because I had some interesting, predictable responses when I posted this on social media. And that is that some people, a minority, saying, Frank, you're part of the problem. This guy they say he had a gun and he turned the gun on the National Guard, and this is a good shoot. So shut up. And I find it almost amusing that they're telling me this as a 25-year veteran FBI agent, who, by the way, as chief inspector at one time in my career, had to investigate all agent-involved shootings. I know that when you point a gun at someone, that you risk getting shot, and maybe you should get shot. That is not the point of my bringing people's attention to this. And in my own life, declaring something a good shoot, meaning, yes, there was a valid use of deadly force, there was an imminent threat to your life, does not mean your investigation is over. The investigation should be, and the question we should be asking is, why in God's name do we still have armed military in our cities acting in the capacity of law enforcement? And I just want to get as the facts continue to come out, I wanted to see your thoughts, Charlie, writ large, on where this is going, and whether we're becoming numb to uniformed troops on our streets with guns.
Okay, I'm really glad you're framing it this way, because let's leave aside the factual situation, which I obviously cannot, speak to, but this militarization of law enforcement, continues, and the focus is off of the ICE invasion of cities like Minneapolis. We've kind of turned our attention to other things, but earlier this year, you could tell that this president and his weird homunculus, Mr. Miller, really were itching, just waiting, lusting to invoke the Insurrection Act. And this is always a possibility out there. This is a president who has been extremely interested in putting active military troops on the streets of American cities. We have seen the willingness to do this. We've seen the use of deadly force. And even though that's not where the focus is right now, it's still in his back pocket. There's nothing about Donald Trump that is not capable of doing this. And again, to your point about, are we numb to all of this? This was my concern earlier this year, is that Trump was, in a sense, softening up the public, saying, get used to these kinds of scenes in American City. Do you think these are normal? That Los Angeles or Minneapolis is so dangerous that we have to have these masked armed agents, or that we have to have National Guard troops on the streets patrolling the streets? And I do worry that we have been numbed about this, that this has no longer been the focus. But again, we have a government. You put these kinds of troops on the streets, and you're going to have deadly incidents. And
Yeah,
maybe this was a good shoot, maybe it wasn't. But where are we headed here? Why are they there? What is Donald Trump's vision of?
that's my concern. And again, the people, again, a handful only of people on social media saying, "Hey, the Memphis is a high crime city, and we need the help." And so my response is, you are falling into the trap, my friend, because I there's a great study that came out on the National Guard in D.C. We've now had a year of National Guard in D.C., and now they're up to 5,000 National Guard troops in D.C. And I wrote a column on the results of this study just a few weeks ago. It's not working. So the short answer is that there's been a reduction in what they call opportunistic crime in the tourist area by 24%. That is it. Violent crime and all of the problems that come out of, say, Anacostia and the inner city of DC are not being addressed by the Guard. And what I loved about this Charlie, this report was it showed if you took the money being spent on National Guard deployments and gave it to those police departments, and they hired additional officers and posted them in the right places, it would be cheaper and long lasting and more effective.
But less performative, because the point of all of this is being performative, isn't it? You could
Yes.
put them in Anacostia, but people wouldn't see them, right? It
No.
wouldn't get the buzz.
Yeah.
So this is not really about suppressing
No.
crime. It's looking like you are suppressing crime. And of course, this is what Trump's been saying, is that everything we're doing is going after the worst of the worst, even as the evidence mounts that no, they're not, and that they're not actually accomplishing what they claim to be accomplishing.
Yeah, you've hit it right on the head. It is performative, and it looks good, and tourists feel better. And as Trump says, my friends can go out to dinner now in DC, which I never felt at risk, but going to dinner. But okay, I get it. Yeah, and I'm very concerned that that's going to turn into, that kind of numbness is going to turn into, well, I guess it's okay to have National Guard at our polling places in November. Yeah, that I do think they're headed there. There's a lesser thing here that happened over the weekend that's getting attention. And it's dangerous, I think, to say, well, who cares? We got bigger things going on. But that is that Trump intervened in the World Cup. That Trump picked up the phone and called the president of FIFA, literally. And had, apparently, after that call, the head of FIFA overturned a red card suspension of Team USA's #1 scorer so that he can play tomorrow. And again, kind of like I'm analyzing the Memphis shooting, was that red card disputed by many sports experts who know more about soccer than I do? Yes, it was. Many people think that was a weak penalty, if any. But that's not the point. The point is the president of the United States reached in and impacted a soccer game decision. And I just think that is so emblematic of the corruption and the intervention that he has.
Oh, I think so too. And I don't actually, let's not pretend this is a minor thing, because the entire rest of the world is looking at the United States and going, okay, on the 250th anniversary, what are they seeing? They're seeing, the bully in chief getting FIFA, which, by the way, has been sucking up to him from the beginning. This is the same guy that overturned the red card, was the same guy that gave him the coveted FIFA Peace Prize. But I wrote in my newsletter today, Frank, this is why we can't have nice things, because almost everything about this World Cup has been fantastic. The United States has looked good.
Yes.
We put forward our best face. The visitors are having a good time. We've basically sidelined ICE, and the men's soccer team has been playing with a verve and a skill that, frankly, I've never seen before on the world stage. So this is really a golden moment for the country and for American soccer. And what does Donald Trump do? comes in and he turns it into a Trumpian scandal.
Yeah.
It's like the guy, has to enshittify what should have been a wonderful moment for America. Perhaps, Frank, you notice a pattern here. We're seeing Trump do this over and over and over again. Look, I love the American soccer team, but now there's going to be this cloud hanging over it. And look, I understand hardcore fans don't care about the details. They just want, they just want to win. But the rest of the world is going, what the freak is wrong with you people?
Yeah,
I
and
think this is unfortunate,
he's ruined it. He's ruined it, and people don't. Again, there are people on social media saying, "Good for us, good for us. Now we'll win the game." No, there'll be an asterisk next to this game, and because it'll say Trump intervened, and the world is looking at us that way, and it actually detracts from any win that they have. Yes, should FIFA have reviewed it on their own? Yes. Did they need the call? No. Is FIFA historically plagued by corruption allegations? Yes, they are.
And he did it for a birthright citizen. I just think this is really important to understand that this is a birthright citizen. And of course, in Donald Trump's mind, he could care less about any sort of consistency. This is like America first. And basically in Trump's mind, understand how this is going to play. Yes, it was crooked. Yes, it was borderline. This twist the rules, but isn't it about time that we had somebody that broke the rules for America on America's behalf? Who better, to put America first than a guy who is actually willing to break every single norm, every single rule. He may be this corrupt asshole, but he's our corrupt asshole. And that's the way it'll play for some people. But the rest of the world, as if they needed more evidence that, that we've gone off the rails. But again, going back to the World Cup, everything was going so well. Yeah. Everything was going so well. And he has to do, just like when he showed up for the Knicks game in the NBA Finals, and has the Trump curse, which he fell asleep there too. Yeah. I don't know. It feels very much on brand of everything else that we've gone through over the last couple of weeks with all of the other celebrations that were hard for anyone to screw up. And yet, what has Donald Trump done?
Yeah, I'm saddened by it, because you're right. The coverage of the World Cup has been replete with foreign nationals coming here and thoroughly enjoying themselves and being welcomed in places as diverse as Kansas City to Houston and Miami and Boston, where the Scots drank the town dry. And the owner of the Patriots, after witnessing that, said to Roger Goodell at the NFL, I want to play an NFL game in Scotland, and rightly so. Let's get a little more into some politics. People who watch my show know that I generally stay at arm's length away and stick to national security issues, but I never before have I seen the melding of politics and national security than I have right now. So I do see threats with this president. Of course, you wrote a piece just last week. I think it was July 3rd it came out. You said, do Democrats understand what's happening to them? And let's talk about that and your views of what it means for the midterm. Your reference there, correct me if I'm wrong, was to the increasing popularity of the Democratic Socialists, and they're winning. They're winning. And let's talk about why, and let's talk about whether you see this as good, bad, or manageable somehow for the Democrats.
Well, I mean, first of all, one of the points that I want to make is, a lot of this is about we need more energy, we need more, need more fight. We want people who are, younger, more dynamic, who are willing to fight Donald Trump. Well, unfortunately, some of the people who have been defeated have been among the leading fighters against Donald Trump, including Dan Goldman in New York, who was one of the lead counsels in Donald Trump's first impeachment. But here's the key thing. If you want to fight Donald Trump, if you want to stop Donald Trump, you have to beat Donald Trump. In order to do that, you must win elections. You must win elections in congressional seats that are not 6+60 Democrat. You need to win the swing seats. In order to stop Donald Trump, you need to win control of the U.S. Senate. Otherwise, he will get more Supreme Court nominees. So the question is, you say the DSA is winning. They're winning primaries. They're defeating other Democrats. In fact, the weird thing is they are defeating generally very progressive Democrats.
Mhm.
So the big question is, does this make it more likely or less likely that the Democrats will be able to win elections in November to stop Donald Trump? And I am quite skeptical about this because the Democratic Socialists of America should not be confused with Nordic Democratic Socialists. These are not the socialists you think they are. In my newsletter today, I point out, and I don't know, this has not gotten a lot of attention. We know that the DSA folks are united in their opposition to Israel and their support for Palestinian rights. That is well known. Um, but the DSA has also been against any U.S. military aid for Ukraine. Their position papers sometimes mimic the Kremlin talking points. They have called for the United States to get out of NATO. They oppose military aid both to Ukraine and to Taiwan. There's a horseshoe thing here, in horseshoe politics, where many of the things that the DSA candidates are saying do mimic things on the right. Now, I understand that people are frustrated with the Democratic establishment. I
Yes,
understand that. I
yes.
understand that people want fighters. The question is whether or not this is going to actually accomplish what I think most Democrats want, or whether you're scratching the ideological id. And the point that I made, which by the way is very, very unpopular, be very unpopular with your audience, is that when I said, do Democrats understand what's going on? The DSA folks understand what they're doing. They are exercising a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. This is not an energizing of the liberal Democratic. These are folks who are out there, many of them on the fringe. And trust me, they are handing Donald Trump and the Republicans the issue that they wanted for the midterm elections. Long answer, so we
Yeah,
can get into
no,
it.
I know people are going to hear this and they're going to be upset, but I mean, I'm not the strategist. You're the guy who's had decades of experience watching this. And I look, I've said this on the air many times. I will vote for anyone reasonable who can defeat MAGA, period, end of discussion. And so if this is going to get in the way, and the Democrats start eating themselves, and we can't defeat MAGA, we need to pay attention to this. And yes, I guess the question is, can the party and the powers that be in the party get their hands around this issue? You just cited the factors driving this. They want more youth. Amen to that. They want and the energy that comes with that. There is a distinct anti-Israel bent to some of this, and they've got to figure that out. The question is, can the party do that? And can the party put forth candidates who may not be the extreme socialists that hand Trump an issue and still address the factors that are driving people?
Well, I would hope so. I would
Yeah.
hope so. And of course, the problem with the question is, what is the party? And does the party have any clout whatsoever? And I think we're basically saying,
No,
these parties,
no.
and there is no Republican Party. The Republican Party is, basically now become a Trumpian cult. The Democratic Party establishment seems to be, rather feckless.
Right.
But I have to say that I'm suffering from a little bit of PTSD because, many of the arguments in favor of going with the extreme or ignoring them because they are the fighters is very similar to what many of us heard from the MAGA folks back in 2016, and that the extremism of the other side then becomes a justification for this. Look, I think that all of the stars have been aligned for Democrats to do very, very well in the midterm election. All they have to do is basically be relatively normal. Now, one of the dangers, and again, going back to 2016, beginning to describe anyone who is not part of this movement as the establishment. The establishment is completely powerless in the Democratic Party. The targets right now are centrist, center left, sometimes very, very progressive members of Congress who are being taken out by members of the DSA who have their own agenda. And two people are saying, well, these two candidates, the one in Colorado and in New York, they've said these extreme things, that America deserved 9/11. Ignore those things. That really doesn't count. what you need to understand is the skill with which Republicans have weaponized those extreme things. Donald Trump, I mean, okay, Donald Trump's full of shit. I mean, we all know this. So he's going to say we're running against communists.
He said it.
So,
He said it in his speech on July 4th.
well, that's right. And so, our temptation is to roll our eyes and go, oh, come on, this is the kind of stuff. Unfortunately, you have candidates who basically are on the record in the past of saying, yes, we are actually communists. We are, we are Marxists. And it's like, okay, now there are people who say, well, Trump was going to say that no matter what. That doesn't mean necessarily that you need to walk into his criticism. So I am concerned about this, especially because Democrats do have a lot of really excellent candidates. They have a really
Yeah.
excellent Senate candidate in Iowa, a model. You have, people like, Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, a deep red state who is a very popular Democratic governor. David Jolly is running a really interesting race,
Yeah.
former Republican
Yeah.
congressman as a Democrat down in Florida. So you have, many of these young dynamic centrists who are really making a very powerful critique of Trumpism, and yet the sexy, bright, shiny object are these folks who, quite frankly, are going to be the subject of tens of millions of dollars of Republican oppo research. So people may say, Frank, you and Charlie shouldn't be talking about these things that these people are saying. Trust me, every voter in every swing state is going to see tens of millions of dollars about the most extreme comments of Democratic nominees. And this is unfair, but life is unfair. And this is the way politics works. So you have to come back. What's the prime directive? Is the prime directive to beat Republicans, to stop Donald Trump, which I think this is the prime directive, or is it to scratch our ideological id? People have to make that decision. Do you want to win or not?
Yeah, this so for our listeners, this comes right back to my training in the FBI, which particularly as head of counter intel, which was with the 3Ds: detect, deter, defeat the threat. Period. And that's why we're having this discussion. You included in that, I think, July 3rd piece that you wrote. By the way, folks, if you don't follow Charlie, he's on Substack. It's called "To the Contrary." Do I have that right? Yeah, "To the Contrary." And you wrote something that got my attention in this piece was, in every Senate battleground except Maine, the majority of the electorate thinks the Democratic Party is too extreme. So that didn't surprise me. The next sentence did, which is, in none of those battlegrounds does a majority think the Republican Party is too extreme. And so that's both absolute nonsense, but it's true. That's what they think.
So those are the crosstabs from the Times Siena poll. I have to say that those two sentences, my head did hit the desk. It's like, oh, come on, are you serious?
Yeah.
Given what they have done, and this is the danger, of course, for getting into a bubble, is that you don't see what's going on or what people are hearing, because you and I, we live this, we watch it every day, and every day it's like, these people are out of their minds. They are supporting the most extreme things. But I think the Republicans have done, pardon me, done a better job of marketing the extremism of the other side. This is a dynamic that people should not ignore. It's bullshit. It's crazy. It makes my head explode like yours. But we have to deal with reality as it exists.
Yeah, I mean, we accuse the far right of making up their own truths and facts, and so we can't ignore the data that's out there, and it's going to be used against the Democratic Party, and we got to get our hands on that. All right, you are, I think, particularly well qualified to even have this discussion with me, Charlie, because you've been around the block with regard to your political journey, and I see that as an asset, that you can see things. It's like, they tell you if you've been to law school, you can see every side of an argument, which is often a liability. But in your case, your political journey, I think, is an asset. Tell us where you've been and where you are now.
Well, I hope it's an asset, because I do sometimes feel like I'm multilingual, which is that I can understand the language sometimes, which maybe is one of the reasons why I think it's crazier than the average the average viewer is like, okay, I know where that came from. I know, what the roots of that are. These recessive genes of bigotry and extremism that used to be out there. So, as people know, for many years, I was a conservative talk show host in Wisconsin. I also wrote a number of books about social issues, mainly, educational issues as well. But before that, my roots are basically in journalism, working for a daily newspaper. I grew up in a family of liberal Democrats. My father was the president of the Wisconsin Civil Liberties Union. He was the campaign manager for Eugene McCarthy in 1968, the
Wow.
anti-war candidate who knocked off Lyndon Johnson. Um, I was actually, when I was like 12 or 13 years old, I can't remember now, a page to the Wisconsin delegation to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, the one with all the riots and Mayor Daley,
Oh,
and I got to see
wow.
Mayor Daley screaming and spitting on me and things like that. So I have been, there's been an arc, and I think one of the reasons, there are, you wonder why certain Republicans or certain conservatives became never Trumpers. So I think that there was a group of people who came from a liberal Democratic tradition who thought that liberal orthodoxy had run out of gas, had become sclerotic, but maintained those liberal democratic instincts in favor of free, the rule of law, human decency, things like that. So there was a group of people who were not susceptible to going on with Donald Trump. And there was not a single moment when I thought this is what I've been talking about. This represents the values that I think are important. So but I do understand that hyper partisan mentality. I do understand that moment in which winning becomes more important than anything because the other side is so maligned. When the fight becomes about the fight, I get that. I understand that. And I look back and think, did I get sucked into that? And and yeah. And so, in a sense, a little bit like a recovering alcoholic, you understand the dynamic of the addiction
Yeah.
in a different way, which is the
Yeah.
way maybe I ought to describe myself. Is that
Well,
what?
and recovering alcoholics have the unique ability to reach out to fellow recovering alcoholics and help them along the way as well. So
Fine.
maybe I can't. We've got to talk about that. We're still going through 900 pages of Trump's latest financial disclosure, and I keep telling people, folks, it's just about 2025. It's just last year's disclosure. It's not. The guy reportedly is well over now, by latest count, maybe 2.4 billion now, and it grows as people get through this document. I broke it down for folks last week in a column, but I'm still learning more. About half from crypto related platforms, and including his own platform and his kids' platform, World Liberty Financial. And I go deep into the corruption and shady characters around that. And the other half getting his record-setting profits coming from his properties at Mar-a-Lago and Doral, often where the Secret Service stays. And Mar-a-Lago is now up to $1 million just to join, not including your dues and monthly and yearly fees. What do you make of an American president who's pocketed well over $2 billion, often in shady ways, in 1 year's time?
Well, I do wonder again whether we become numb to the level of the corruption there. And of course, yeah, as you pointed out, this is just 1 year. This is his first year back into office when he figured out. Like the quote that is really the haunting one is that in the first term, he tried to go by the rules, and then he discovered nobody cared. Nobody cared if we were ripping off or engaging in these kinds of corruption. To say that it's unprecedented doesn't capture it. I mean, this is what a lawless, immune, mafia boss presidency looks like. And when the Supreme Court basically said you are immunized, when the Republican Party decided we will never hold you accountable, when we became just overwhelmed, he has flooded the zone with one form of corruption after another, and he revels in it. He brags in it. He's flying around in the Qatari jet. The crypto deal, by the way, speaking of metaphors, where he and his family made so much money, whereas his marks, his supporters, lost billions of dollars, right? He's profiting
Yeah.
while, the rubes that trusted him are taking it in the pants.
Yeah.
Once again, you're detecting a pattern there. But I do worry, Frank, I'm really glad you brought this up. I do worry that there's just been so much that people kind of throw up their hands,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
his thing that nobody cares, because is anybody going to do anything about it? Will there ever be any consequences for it? I don't know. I'd like to tell you yes,
You're right.
but
Yeah.
given what he's done to the
Yeah.
Department of Justice, given his immunity, given his sweeping pardon power, um, they're going to coin as much. They're going to stuff as much money in their pockets as they can, and they really think they're going to get away with it. And I'm not sure they're wrong, which is
Yeah,
tragic.
I mean, if there's any bright spot in all of this, true experts on authoritarianism and fascism throughout history, like Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who I've had on the show, she'll tell you, look, corruption is what inevitably wakes people up and says, and they say that's enough. And the problem, of course, with that, and God, that's why I feature the corruption every time I see it. But his people's response to these financial disclosures so far has been, he's an astute businessman. Don't tell me, because I posted one day, he's in it for himself. And responses I got from the MAGA crowd, including trolls, was the man took a bullet in the ear for us. He's not about himself. This is not for him. And well, okay. Well, we're in the bullet in the air mode now.
No, this is the cult. But going to the point about whether or not corruption is the break point, it might be. I've been a little bit dark here, but given what happened in Hungary, where Viktor Orban rigged everything. I mean, he rigged the elections, he rigged the districting, he destroyed the independent media, he went after the universities. You would think that he would be unstoppable, and yet the opposition rallied around not ideological issues. They rallied around the corruption. It is the corruption, stupid. And I wish that the midterms would be about the corruption, stupid, that he's for himself, he's not for you, especially coming from a populist. And you do feel when I talk about connecting the dots, the whole Marie Antoinette moments where he's obsessed with his arches and his ballrooms and his billionaire crony buddies. People are seeing this out in the country and they're going, wait, 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 wait. Weren't you supposed to be the voice of the little guy?
Yeah.
And what are you doing? You are lining your pocket. You are spending stuff on your ego projects. And you're hanging out with your oligarch billionaire friends. What are you doing for me?
Yeah.
And I think this is a tremendous vulnerability. So I'm hoping. It looks like now maybe the midterms are going to be corruption versus communism. Or at least that's what Donald Trump wants it to be, because he thinks he can get away with the corruption as long as he scares people about the communism. Right? Isn't that
I think you've set the table for what Democratic advertising, Democrat Party advertising needs to look at. It needs to be about the corruption, and the data shows us that Americans, more than in the last several decades, are not able to make ends meet. Credit card debt is through the roof. And yes, the Dems should be playing hard on that topic.
You remember that very powerful line that Trump had in 2024 against Kamala Harris? She is for they and them, Donald Trump is for you. Turn that around on you. Who is Donald Trump for? Show people, I think a lot of going back to the DSA stuff, I mean, a lot of the energy is, I think, just disillusionment with the oligarchy that we have, the kakistocracy, that this is a world of billionaires and trillionaires who are running roughshod, not just over human decency, but over free markets. And so, channel that, into the connection that while you are suffering, what is Donald Trump doing? Who is Donald Trump for? We are for you. He is for him and his cronies and his buddies. By the way, it's out there in just massive screens in broad daylight. So Democrats ought to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, it's not hard. It's all blatant. Well, that's a good segue to wrap up with our discussion now. Let's turn to the midterms exactly and what you envision the ramp up to be, I'm dangerous sometimes because my training is to think of, I got paid to think of worst case scenarios, right? And people often, their head explodes when I bring those up, and I've done it before, and it's not pretty. Let's talk more what realistic scenarios that you think we're looking at as we get closer to November and November itself.
Well, I actually think that if you're not alarmed about the world, about the worst case scenarios, then you're not paying attention. So I agree with your take on all of this. I mean, number one, you have to win these elections, you have to win them decisively. But what is Donald Trump going to do? You know, Donald Trump has made no secret of the fact that he wants to rig these elections. His obsession with the SAVE Act, the fact that he would tank the housing bill in order to get a vote suppressing bill through, is a tell. Will they have ICE agents who go to the polls? Will they use National Guard? He certainly wants to. Who's going to stop him? Then, of course, going to a worst case scenario, do we honestly think that Mike Johnson in the Congress, will simply seat Democrats? Will there be more election denialism? He has gotten the Republican Party completely into lockstep behind his big lies. What will they do post-election? And again, this may sound extreme, but we're talking about Donald Trump, a man who a man who's already fomented a violent insurrection to overturn an election, who's called for suspending the Constitution so he could be restored to power after he was defeated. So, like, the people, I mean, it's right there. Of
Yeah.
course, you should be alarmed. Of course, you know who he is.
Yeah, and he wants and he wants very much to have a slush fund still to pay off the people who were convicted and pled guilty on January 6th. Essentially, would hand him a paid militia if he wanted to call them out again.
Yeah, a paid militia who can count on him to pardon them if they were to, violate any laws. This is a uniquely dangerous moment because Donald Trump is a uniquely dangerous figure, which again goes back to my obsession is this is not the moment to scratch your ideological head. He must be stopped this
Yeah.
year. Otherwise, we keep thinking, well, it can't get any worse than this. Oh, yes, it can.
Oh, absolutely. And I tell people frequently, Charlie, who ask me, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And we've got to try to mitigate that worst part by doing everything we can, not sitting by idly. I know our audience doesn't sit by idly. They're engaged, they're active.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Get out there, and if it's writing or communicating with your lawmakers, if it's showing up at No King's Days and other rallies, expressing your dismay to even your Republican representatives, do it. Because it's an existential threat. Charlie, I've enjoyed this discussion and hope to have further discussions with you.
Anytime.
All right. Stay safe. Keep up the good work. And folks, subscribe if you don't to Charlie Sykes on Substack, and his page is To the Contrary, some good writing and commentary. And we will see you, everyone, on Wednesday with another great guest from Colorado. I'll just tease that out. We'll see you on Wednesday on the Frank Figliuzzi Show. Thanks.